All right. Thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate being here. Along with being an associate professor at Johns Hopkins, I'm also the co-editor-in-chief of PLOS Computational Biology. This is actually it's July, right? We're still in July. This is actually it's now 20 years since PLOS Computational Biology started. 20 years ago in July 2005, and actually it's particularly neat to be presenting here because when PLOS Computational Biology started 20 years ago, it was founded in collaboration with ISCB and was an official journal for at least the first decade of its life. So it's really neat to be here to talk to you. So the starting point, I should say, I'm going to talk mostly about our journal. Some things might be a little different in other journals, but a lot of the principles will be the same. But one of the things I want to emphasize is when we're talking about decision making, right? Editors making decisions at journals, right? All the editors, from us, the editors in chief, on to the handling editors, all the way down to the reviewers, everybody who's doing these jobs, these are volunteers, right? They're doing service to the community. They're your colleagues, right? Yours and mine. As such, right, as these colleagues, there's a limited amount of us and there's a limited amount of time. And so when we're talking about busy fields, busy, hot, crowded fields with lots of submissions, right, we see these massive increases in numbers of submitted manuscripts, and it's not always straightforward to then match that with capacity. Right now, our journal has, in the last couple of years, we've made a huge effort. We've, I think, more than doubled the number of people on our editorial board. We've over 350 editors now. We handle, close to 2,500 manuscripts a year. So we have to be conscious, right, that this is all time. That this key resource that we have is the volunteer time of all of our reviewers and our editors. We have to be efficient and careful with that. So let's talk about these decisions that editors make. So, authors, you submit a manuscript. The staff works to make sure that it's technically okay and ready to be viewed. So a section editor takes a look at it. Section editor, someone in your kind of general area, right? And the first decision they have to make is: are they actually going to proceed with it, or are they going to send it straight back to you? This is sometimes referred to as the desk reject. Sometimes referred to by authors as the dreaded desk reject, where it sort of comes straight back to you as that actually thanks but no thanks. And sometimes that'll be the decision of one editor. At our journal, actually, there's a section editor there are many section editors who then, if they choose to proceed with it, they don't go straight to reviewers. It goes to an academic editor who's closer to the research area of the paper, who also may then choose to return it back to you. Right. And so this is the first decision, right? Are they going to actually go and invite reviewers? Or are they going to return it to you without review? Right. So let's tell you a little bit about this decision. At our journal, the editors are empowered to make a decision on what to do about this paper. Are they going to proceed to review? So they're going to think about, is it in scope for the journal? Is it novel? Is it ready to review? I think time was, when the field was a bit smaller, that I think we probably, all of us have done this a little bit sometimes, is like, well, the paper's not quite ready, but we'll fix it in review. We really sort of want to make sure that it's ready to go out to review. We want to respect the reviewer's time and make sure that it's ready to view. For our journal, we have a strict code availability requirement, so we double check that, for example, make sure it's ready. So as authors, help us help you. Make sure your manuscript is in scope for our journal and ready to send out to review. But the editors make a judgment call, not just on those criteria, but also, is it likely to actually make it through the review process? Is it something that, doesn't have to be perfect straight off the bat, but on review, on revision is going to be likely to be accepted? We don't want to expend the time and goodwill of all of those volunteer editors and reviewers, right? And we don't want to waste the time of the authors. So just as give you a bit of a guideline, as typical statistics, about a quarter to a third of the papers that come in get this kind of desk reject. They don't get sent for review, they get straight back. But there's about another quarter to a third that get rejected after review, right? So that's a little over half that ultimately don't make it to publication in our journal. And so we just want to make sure that that we're as I say, spending the time of the reviewers and editors reasonably. There's one other key part that goes into this decision, which is, do we have people who are going to be able to edit and review these papers, right? Who should actually handle it? Because it's not just a case of, okay, let's proceed, let's keep going, let's not send it back to the authors, let's keep going. The decision is, who do I send it to next? Who's the best editor for this? Who are the best reviewers for this, right? So like I say, we have a large pool of academic editors in these areas. We will, of course, also invite guest editors if their expertise is appropriate. But if we can't identify the right people, we'll send it back to you, because there's no point us exploring. We need to make sure that that we send it back to you in a timely way. So again, help us help you. Make sure you're suggesting really appropriate people to edit and review these manuscripts. I was going to say, time was that we might have to invite 5 or 6 people to review a paper to get 3 to accept. I think that's gone up. I think any editor will tell you that's gone up recently. It's maybe 10 or 12. I think, Thomas, you said earlier it's maybe 30. It could be a lot. So we need to make sure that because people are so busy, we have to make sure that we're identifying the right people and sending it out. Okay, so I'm going to sort of, through this presentation, sort of just hit on a few principles that I think may not be super obvious. But this, like I call it the dreaded desk reject, it shouldn't be viewed as a bad thing, in my opinion. When you get it back, don't feel like it's a rejection as such. Really, it's just about this mismatch. And I totally get that it can be frustrating, but we have to make sure that we're making efficient use of the time of our editors and reviewers. So while it can be frustrating to get that quick email back going, thank you, but no thank you, that enables you to go submit elsewhere, right? Perhaps to a more appropriate journal. It prevents that additional work on the part of the authors and reviewers that might have just resulted in a rejection anyway, just later, right? But now you're frustrated because it's taken time to get to that point, and they're frustrated because they're like, why'd you send me this? It's not ready, right? So it is actually, in my view, actually a useful thing. So how do you increase the likelihood of getting to review? In other words, how do you avoid a desk reject? I won't cover all of these points because, for example, selecting the right journal, Laura already talked about this in detail. It's really important. Writing good cover letter, Thomas already covered this as well. This is really important. So like I've just mentioned, make sure you're suggesting really appropriate, non-conflicted, surprisingly, it happens more than you might think, people who will review. And like I said, appropriate people. Don't just list the alphabetically first editors in your field. Again, happens surprisingly more often than you might think. Don't list the most famous person. Who is actually going to review your paper? And then lastly, and I really want to encourage people, like, get involved in the peer review process. Volunteer as an editor, volunteer as a reviewer. You can basically get involved at many career levels. You don't have to be sort of the most senior person in the world, right? Get involved. This is all runs on volunteer service. Okay, so you've made it all the way through all of that first decision, making it to review. There is, of course, this second decision. The editors get the reviews back, right? And now they decide what to do. So the editor reads these reviews, these critiques, and each of the reviewers will make a recommendation, reject it, accept it, big revision, like minor revision, major revision. The editor, remember, these are advisory, and I'm going to give you a little bit more detail on what I mean by that. The editor makes a decision and then explains it to you. I want to make clear the editor's decision is not just counting up those accept, reject votes, right? Authors often misunderstand this. Reviewers give advice, the editors make a decision. The editors identify, which are the most important points, right? They don't sort of treat them all equally. They are really thinking these through. You could have 3 accepts and 1 reject, but if that reject is really convincing, then that may be the editor's decision. I've also seen the opposite be true. Multiple critiques, but then you have one person going, no, I really see this paper and see the value in this paper, and that can be the way it happens too. And then you get your decision letter, and then there's one final step, which is now maybe you're invited to resubmit, and you got to go through this all again, and the editors have these decisions to make again. They see your resubmission, but now you've done a response to reviewers, you've gone through the critiques, so now they have this additional piece of information. So make sure when you're submitting this that you're really addressing things carefully, because this now is the difference between when you resubmit, the editor going, yeah, they're not taking this seriously, they're not improving their paper, so I'm just going to go ahead and send this back to them, or actually completing the process. So remember, you got to address everything that the reviewers have said to you. You don't necessarily need to accept the premise of every one of their critiques. These reviewers are human too. They're not always perfect either. So if you think they're wrong, that's okay. Make your argument, make your case, but don't just ignore it. You got to address it. but make sure it's really easy to read and really easy to follow. I'll just end with two quick more principles that maybe give you a bit more insight into the process. One, like I say, we have a huge editorial board, huge number of manuscripts. Every editor can't read every paper. So we absolutely are decentralized, and we trust the editors to make the decision. And you should too. They're your colleagues. They have the expertise. They have the right views to the right position to make that decision. And yet they are not alone, right? Sometimes, this decision letter comes back with this, one name or two names. Remember that they have the access to all the rest of the editorial board, including us, the editors-in-chief, and they will often, for those tricky papers, you may see the decision letter, but there may be a whole ton more editors that got to weigh in and talk and advise them through all of that. All right, so I'll just end there and say thanks to all the people involved in the journal, all the editors and the reviewers, and to all the staff and at the publishing house, the PLOS, who really make it work, including our journal development manager, Joe, who's here. And I did want to just sort of highlight that some of these slides started when we developed a workshop with a great organization called the Black Women in Computational Biology Network. So I've adopted some of those slides and used them here as well, so you could check them out as well. Anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate it.